Hi students, this is Miss Whitaker. I just took my pen. Okay. And I'm doing a video today with one-step equations. One-step equations, we usually solve them by doing the inverse operation. What are inverse operations? They are the opposite of the operation that's occurring. So for example, if my problem has addition in it, to solve for that variable, we have to do the inverse. So this is what we are doing. Then we solve the one-step equation by undoing it. And undoing an addition problem is doing the inverse, which is subtraction. If they are doing subtraction in the problem of the variable, in order to solve for that variable, you have to do the inverse, which would be addition. If they are multiplying in the problem, to do the opposite of it or to undo it is division. If they are dividing, do the opposite or inverse is multiplying. So that's kind of like your key right there to help you. So for example, if I was doing the problem, let's see if we're going to do, let's do h plus 6 equals 10. If I have to solve for h, a lot of you guys can look at the problem and kind of figure it out. That obviously has to be something bigger than 10. Or not, sorry, not something bigger than 10. It has to be something smaller so that when we add it to 6, it would give me 10. But if we're solving it by doing the inverse, what we do is what I would usually do in class is we would draw a line down where the equal sign is, and I would say, okay, what's happening with the variable? Here's our variable. What's happening beside the variable? Well, they're adding 6, so they're adding 6. So how do I get rid of that? Is I have to do the inverse or undo it by subtracting 6. So I will subtract 6 from both sides. What you do to one side, you have to do to the other. And now what happens is if I have 6 and I take 6 away, then I'm left with 0. I'm left with nothing. So the only thing remaining for me is that h on this side, which I wanted. I want to get the h by itself. Now I have to solve the other side, because if I have 10 and I take 6 away, it doesn't cancel out. I actually have some stuff left. I actually have 4 left. So h equals 4. So you can always go back to your original problem and plug it in and see if it makes sense. If I plug in 4 for h and I add 6, does it give me 10? Yes. So h is equal to 4. If I do another one, for example, if I do one with maybe division, if I have h and I divide it by 6, and that equals 42. Okay, so what is happening? What are they doing in my problem? And to get the h by itself, the variable, I have to undo it. Well, if I see a fraction line, that means it's dividing, so I know they are dividing. So how do I get rid of that so I can have the variable by itself? Is I do the inverse. So I have to multiply. So I'm going to be multiplying by 6. So I draw my line down here. So I know whatever I do on one side of the line, I have to do on the other side of the line. So to get rid of that dividing by 6, I have to multiply by 6 on both sides. Okay, so it's kind of like 6 over 1 is kind of what happens. So they cancel out. 6 divided by 6 cancels out. And I'm just left with h. H equals, and now I have to do 42 times 6. And 42 times 6 gives me 252. Okay, so I have to kind of plug it in and see if it makes sense. So I have to plug in 252 for h. If I plug that in, does that make sense? 252 divided by 6, could that give me 42? Yes, that does make sense. Another kind of problem might look like this. It might say 5h equals 30. Okay, so again, you want to make your divider where the equal sign is, and whatever's happening on one side, you have to do the inverse on both sides. So I see they're side by side. So what they're doing is they are multiplying. How do I get rid of that? I have to undo it by dividing. So if they're multiplying by 5 on one side, I have to divide by 5 on both sides. If I divide by 5, 5 divided by 5 cancels out. Divide by 5 on the other side. Now I'm left with h on one side. H equals 6. I plug it in always to see if it makes sense. So I go back up to look where h is, and I'm going to plug in 6 here. And would 5 times 6 give me 30? Yes, that makes sense. So we did a bunch of different kind of problems to see if I can help you. Step number 1, to look and see what's happening with the variable. What operation is occurring with the variable? Second, you have to do the inverse on both sides. And then that solves for the variable. So I hope this quick little video helps you, brings it back to you, reminds you about when we did this in class a while ago. And do the practice questions and the Google form quiz. And that's it. Have a great Thursday. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.